I'm August Brice, and I have a question for you. Are you one of those people, or do you know someone that doesn't believe that EMF from our digital devices can possibly hurt them? Okay, be prepared to change your mind. You're about to hear from a diagnostic radiologist, a researcher, a doctor who studies the biological effects of electromagnetic fields. That's wireless radiation and all types of EMF. Dr. Brown is the Vice President of Scientific Research and Clinical Affairs for an organization that I've been telling you about, one that I've been learning from over the years, the Environmental Health Trust. Rob has interpreted imaging for 400,000 patients through institutions like the Cleveland Clinic and the NYU University Hospital. He currently teaches right now on the subject at Carnegie Mellon University. Rob has written 2 books. The latest one is UNPLUG. A radiologist explores the damage caused by electropollution and how you can prevent it. So Dr. Rob Brown will tell you in no uncertain terms that he's convinced that man-made electromagnetic fields are harmful to our biology. He's going to tell us why. We'll talk about the latest research. And we're going to talk about why different people can respond differently to exposure. And of course, some practical ways to use technology more thoughtfully. So let's get to it. Here he is, Rob Brown. Rob, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm just absolutely thrilled that you're here. And welcome to the Thriving with Technology podcast.
Thank you so much, August. I'm thrilled to be here too. Great to talk with you.
And we're going to talk about your book. We're going to talk about what you do. But at the very beginning, the first time that I saw who you were and that you were working with the Environmental Health Trust as a physician, a practicing radiologist, I thought, I want to ask him what he would say to all of the trolls that ask me or comment or tell me that I'm absolutely crazy. There's nothing wrong with wireless radiation, that I need an education, that I might as well go stand out in the sun if I'm afraid of wireless energy. It does absolutely nothing to our bodies. I'd like to hear you weigh in on that.
I used to believe that too. About 12 years ago, I went to a medical conference where I learned otherwise. And ever since then, I've been studying this field. Most people out there in the scientific world, they believe the standard doctrine that if it's non-ionizing radiation, it doesn't cause physical damage to an atom. So how can it therefore have an effect? And when I heard that in this conference, it really didn't make any sense to me because you think about photosynthesis, you think about the ability for our eyes to detect light, our skin makes vitamin D, plants can make photosynthesis with red light, lower frequency than white light or blue light, and yet all of these frequencies create biological effects in different organisms. So how could it be that non-ionizing radiation doesn't? It just doesn't make sense. But what they believe is that the only effect is heat, the generation of heat. And we know that microwave radiation causes heat because that's how our microwave ovens work. But it's also been clearly documented in thousands and thousands of studies at this point that it causes something called oxidative stress in cells. So the cells have to be exposed. So, we're dealing with different exposure rates depending on tissue depth and the frequency of the radiation, the intensity of it is very complicated physics. But basically, the higher the frequency, so as you go from, say, extremely low frequencies from power lines and dirty electricity, and then you work your way up the electromagnetic spectrum to infrared, as you increase the frequency, you decrease the depth of penetration correspondingly. And what that means is that, for example, the center of your body may be impacted by these extremely low frequencies, whereas maybe only a couple of millimeters of skin might be impacted by, say, something in the terahertz range. And there's so much variability because the intensities vary, and also these frequencies are being modulated, meaning they're being manipulated to carry information. And we don't really understand what happens to modulated radio frequency when it hits our body. I will tell you that sound, like if you go to an orchestra and you hear a composition of instruments playing music, the sound that's hitting your ear is just a composite of all those different frequencies, but your ear has the ability to discriminate all of those sounds. It demodulates the signal that's coming into it. The same thing may be happening with electromagnetic fields that are being used to transmit information. And if that is the case, then even though, let's say, a carrier wave that's transmitting a 5G frequency might be at a very high range, and these physicists believe that it's only going to penetrate into a couple of millimeters into the body, if it's modulated with lower frequencies, those may be going deeper. So there's so many things we don't really understand, but the argument that it doesn't do anything is hogwash, and these people are just ignorant and they haven't kept up with the science, which is, I mean, it's understandable. You go to school, you get your degree, you think you know everything, and you go into industry and you work, and you don't keep up, especially if there's information out there that's going to make your industry seem like it's on the wrong path. So I ran into the same thing early on with somebody who worked at a big company, and he looked at me and said, "Oh, there's too bad they haven't come up with the one study to prove that there's a non-heating effect." And I thought, "Oh my goodness,
Everyone does want the silver bullet, though. And you say oxidative stress, and some people say, well, so many different things cause oxidative stress.
And that's
What,
true.
as a physician, what do you say to that? How important is it? How
Well,
big of a
that is
problem is it?
true. That is true. There are a lot of different things that cause oxidative stress. It is a non-specific finding or reaction, but that's fine. I mean, that's very, very significant. Oxidative stress is a gateway to all kinds of problems potentially in the cell. So even though it sounds like, oh, it's, two words, oxidative stress, big deal. When you have oxidative stress, it means that you have molecules in your cells that are looking for electrons. They're unstable. So they're called reactive oxygen species, and they're looking for electrons. And if you don't have enough donor electrons in your cell, which are typically provided by glutathione, these reactive oxygen species, they start looking for electrons somewhere else. And so if they take them from the cell membrane, then the cell membrane can become damaged. If they take them from the DNA can become damaged. If they take them from proteins, the proteins can become denatured and stop functioning properly. So and we're talking about on a cellular level. We're not talking about a whole organ, but potentially over time, and if a sufficient number of cells are impacted in this way, you could end up with a diseased organ and even cancer. So there's all kinds of stuff that that can occur from oxidative stress that we need to be aware of, and we can't dismiss it. That was the piece when I first learned that it caused oxidative stress that got me thinking, oh my goodness, this is terrible.
And so this would help explain why we have so many studies that are talking about diverse biological effects, from infertility to lack of melatonin production to cancer to Parkinson's to Alzheimer's to autism. So this might explain it, the way that you put how oxidative stress can affect so many different organ systems.
Well, it can affect it's not even an organ system, it's every cell. So any cell and every cell can be impacted by oxidative stress. The thing that's unique about radiation is that it doesn't respect tissue boundaries. So for example, if you take some sort of toxin, or you put a toxin on your skin, or you ingest it, or you inhale it, that toxin is going to impact the cells that it comes in contact with. And perhaps if it's absorbed by the bloodstream, it'll be delivered to certain organs. And if there's a way for the toxin to get out of the bloodstream and into the organ, then it can affect that organ. But otherwise, that's what the effect is limited to. But radiation is different. So the greatest exposure is at the skin surface. And as you work your way deeper, you're getting less of an exposure, but it's impacting every cell type in that path. If you have a whole body exposure from, say, a cell phone tower across the street, your whole body is being impacted. If you're putting a cell phone in your pocket, which I don't believe anybody should ever do, then you have a localized intense impact on the cells in your hip and right near your pelvis. Or of course, you have your reproductive organs and your rectum, and there's a lot of research out there suggesting that the increase in colon cancer could be a result of people carrying cell phones in their pocket, uh, and GYM problems, male infertility. There's just so much out there. The problem is that it doesn't happen in everybody. It doesn't even happen in the same person every time they're exposed. And so that's another unique thing about radiation, as opposed to, say, a biochemical toxin where you can have a certain dose and you can expect a certain result. With radiation, there are two types of reactions. One is called the deterministic reaction, and that is a definable cause and effect. So I expose myself to a certain type of radiation, I'm going to experience heating. You know, you put the cell phone against your face, you're going to feel the warmth of the cell phone. That is a deterministic effect. It's reproducible, it's measurable, and that's where our exposure limits are based on. Our exposure
Sorry.
limits, and for the FCC and ICNIRP and all these regulatory agencies, they're trying to keep us from being cooked. That's basically what they're trying to do. And so they've limited our exposure to a certain amount so that our tissues don't get cooked like we've been put in a microwave oven. However, there's another type of effect from radiation called the stochastic effect. And we learned this from dropping bombs in Japan in World War II. We found that a certain number of people that lived away from the blast site developed cancers from the radiation. And depending on how far away they were from the blast site, they had a different percentage of people came down with cancer. And the rest of the world was the control population. And it was really then that we learned that it was undeniable that radiation causes cancer. Now, that's, of course, ionizing radiation, but the physics are similar in terms of stochastic and deterministic. So and what I'm going to say in terms of non-ionizing radiation is the development of oxidative stress, and of course, all of the stuff that happens following is a stochastic effect. There's so many variables. For example, your state of hydration, how much fat you have in your body, because fat can increase the depth that the radiation has to travel to get to sensitive organs. That's why children are more sensitive than adults, because they've got smaller, thinner bodies. There's so many variables. How much glutathione do you have in your cells? What's the state of your immune system? How healthy are you in general? Do you have any other toxins on board? Because some of these toxins can be synchronistically and augment the impact of electromagnetic fields. I even read a study in which women who have a navel piercing are increasing the exposure to their baby that's developing in utero. So there's so many variables.
Wait, why?
Because it does something to the radiation. It somehow focuses it, or I'm not sure. I don't know.
The actual piercing or wearing a metallic earring? Do
No,
we
no.
know?
I think it's the piercing on the navel, that
Wow.
where it's overlying the uterus, and somehow
Wow.
it's creating some type of impact. Now, this is a study. It doesn't mean, it was one study that showed this, but it's interesting. And it begs the question, there's so much we don't understand about this technology, but in my opinion, we should not be throwing it around willy-nilly. It's another form of pollution, and that's why, we call it electropollution. People are like, what does that mean, electropollution? We're being exposed to this stuff from all different sources at all times, and our bodies don't know what to do with it.
There are three things now from that answer that was fabulous that I want to talk about. One is what you said about the ambient energy from the cell phone tower across the way versus the energy directly coming from the phone in your pocket. Can both of those exposures affect our entire biological system?
I would say yes. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with the research that I did showing the cell phone can cause rouleau formation.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that was a really interesting study. And although I've only published the case report at this point. I do have other data that I'm going to publish shortly. It's if you put a cell phone against somebody's knee, and it doesn't have to be the knee, it can be the hip, it can be any body part, even probably, up to your ear, it can affect the blood cells that are circulating through that area. And so what happened is I had a subject scanned her leg with an ultrasound machine, showed a normal appearance to the blood, and then exposed her knee for 5 minutes to a cell phone that was on. All the antennas were on, but it wasn't actively transmitting or sending information. After those 5 minutes, I re-imaged her knee, and her blood had changed in characteristic, and it was what's normally the normal state is called anechoic, meaning there are no echoes in it because the blood cells are too small to reflect sound in an ultrasound machine. But after the cell phone exposure, the blood had echoes in it, a lot of echoes. It looked like a swirling fog in a sense, and that was because the blood cells had aggregated into chains called rouleau formation. And Magda Havas and Beverly Rubik had described this with dark field microscopy, and but that technique had been criticized because it was an in vitro technique, meaning they had to take the blood out of the body to put it on a slide. And so other researchers said, well, it's not really valid. There could be so many other reasons why this was happening to the blood. This study that I did with the ultrasound was in vivo, meaning it was within the body. So, in answer to your question, just putting a cell phone against your skin can impact the circulating blood, which then, of course, travels throughout your whole body. It's not just the red blood cells that are being impacted. Of course, the white blood cells are also being impacted, and lots of studies have shown that electromagnetic fields and radiofrequency radiation can impact your white blood cells. Well, that's your immune system. So we're talking about systemic effects from local exposure.
Okay. And then the second question about that great answer that you gave us was you said that some people will have no effect at all, and some from time to time by the same exposure. What's going on
Right.
with that?
There's a lot of variables, and I'll use the same subject as an illustration. So we studied her 4, 5, 6 times, but on one occasion she did not go into rouleau, and I was confused because we had documented rouleau after 3 separate occasions, and I'm like, oh, that was strange. How come I wonder why you didn't go in? She said, well, I took an Advil the night before. Do you think that might have had something to do with it? And well, this is not a clot. We're not forming a blood clot with rouleau, but perhaps the administration of this anti-inflammatory might have impacted her blood chemistry in a way that it didn't go into rouleau. I don't know. More research to figure that out. On
Because you're not
another
going to
occasion,
recommend everyone just take an Advil and go stand
no,
in
I mean,
front
I
of the
would
cell
not
tower,
recommend. I
right?
wouldn't recommend that. No, but I'm just saying that there's a lot of variables when you're talking about energy. It's really this is a new realm for medicine. I mean, I'm not a new paradigm. People just call it a paradigm shift because healthcare is all about anatomy and biochemistry and enzymes and molecules and drugs and pharmacology, and that's what doctors are taught. We're not taught about energy, the manipulation of energy, affecting energy. That's kind of a alternative and complementary and alternative medicine practice. And even there, we don't really understand all that's going on. I mean, we have a lot to learn in terms of the energy currents in our body and how they're affected and what they actually do to our cells and how they transmit out into the environment. It's really kind of the secret to life in a sense, I believe.
And shouldn't we have studied this before we invented something that could affect that energy all the time in a very real
Yes,
way?
yes, but at the same point, it could be that this brings us to that precipice where we now can study it or realize that it's real, because there's been a lot of hesitation by the medical community to accept anything that's not their standard dogma. It's, chemistry or anatomy. It's if you're going into this realm of energy, you're getting into a realm that's not it's not taught, it's not understood, it's not accepted, and medicine creeps along slowly, slowly, slowly. I'll tell you a quick story if you want to hear about how
Yes.
I was first introduced to this. When I finished my training and I took my board exam, I thought I knew everything because I was a radiologist, and all doctors, you think you know everything when you get out of training because you studied so hard. And anyway, I took a hike down Mount Rainier with my cousin, and on the way down, I was preparing for a trip out to Africa. I was going to teach at this Kilimanjaro Christian Medical Center for a couple of months. I was going to teach
Oh,
them radiology after my
very
training.
cool. Very cool.
It was really cool. And during that trip, I was going to go hike Mount Kilimanjaro, which was very, very strenuous trek. Anyway, in preparation, I took this hike down Mount Rainier, and about halfway down, I stepped on a rock wrong. It wasn't all paved like it is now. I stepped on a rock wrong, and I felt the squish in my knee, and I thought, "Oh my goodness!" And I hobbled back to this campsite where we were staying, and I went to an orthopedic surgeon. When I got home, he gave me anti-inflammatories. They took the pain away, but as soon as the course of anti-inflammatories was over, the pain came back. And I was
Meniscus
working.
or ACL, MCL?
I hadn't. It was. I didn't have an MRI at the time, but he was thinking it was probably a meniscal tear. So, but I didn't have the MRI. But I was working with another radiologist, and he said, my wife sells this product. Would you be interested in checking it out? They're magnets. And I thought, magnets? Like, that's kind of bizarre. Like, I had no framework to even where to put that in my mind, but I didn't want to be rude. And I thought, okay, I'll check it out. Sure. So she came into the office and she put these magnets on my knee, and the pain, like, it dissipated. I drove home. I put my foot on the clutch, and I didn't feel that twinge of pain that I had been feeling for about a month and a half. I thought, this is unbelievable. So in the morning, I woke up. I didn't have the pain. I took the magnets off. I took a shower, and the pain came back. So I realized I wasn't healed, but the magnets were doing something to mollify the pain. Anyway, to make a long story short, again, I wore those magnets for months. I wore them to Africa. I wore them up and down Mount Kilimanjaro. I went gorilla trekking, no pain, never ended up with arthritis, never had surgery. That was the end of it. So
So what were
it
they
really,
doing? What were the magnets doing?
I still don't know. But I guess the point of the story is that the following year I did a fellowship in San Diego with the guru of my subspecialty, musculoskeletal radiology. And I told him about this incredible healing, which I thought was just miraculous. And he said he didn't, he had no doubt that it was true. He said, but you can't research this in the beginning of your career because you'll be looked at as as a quack just from day one, thinking that you can do research on something that's so far out there. No, no, no. You have to establish yourself in the field first as a conventional person who's not going to push the envelope too far. And unfortunately, that's the whole field. It wasn't limited to him, but that's the point. This talking about energy and the impact of energy on the body's systems is so far out there that most physicians know nothing about it and don't want to know about
Interesting. And as a person who realized she had EHS in the 90s, which means I have electro hypersensitivity, meaning I can feel the energy, I said immediately that this energy from this phone that we can't see or smell or touch is interfering with the energy of my body. That was the only way I could describe it.
it. That's a great description.
That was it. That's just how it felt. So, which then took me down a different path. But here we meet today, and we're on the same
That's,
vibration, the same
yes.
wavelength. It's amazing, really. But I'm just so happy that an actual medical doctor has these insights. And so we talked about the two things that I wanted to cover just a second ago. There was one third one, but I'm just so fascinated by this conversation. I hear what you're saying. We're not sure exactly what can change the way the exposure affects our bodies, but we are sure that many, many, many times, in fact, maybe the majority of times that we're exposed, that there is something happening biologically.
Yes.
Okay.
The body's reacting. The body is reacting, but for most people, there's enough glutathione on board. The cell doesn't go into oxidative stress. Perhaps there's an influx of this all starts apparently from an influx of calcium. So the EMFs impact uh, proteins on the cell membranes, which then open up, and calcium is able to flood into the cell. And that's the genesis for the oxidative stress. So I believe that happens regardless of one's symptoms, but then if they have enough glutathione on board and they can oxidize those or reduce those reactive oxygen species, then they regain their normal homeostasis. It's just the constant exposure over and over and over again that then leads to the depletion of those molecules, and then that's when people get sick. So I think it's really crucial to have periods of the day, particularly at night, for anybody to just live in an electromagnetically clean environment so that the body can heal and restore itself. But I wanted to throw out one more thing here.
Please.
We're talking about variables and in the rouleau formation, and there was one other one that I wanted to mention. So this subject, there was one other time that she didn't go into rouleau, and it was after she had slept on an earthing pad, a grounding pad. And that was fascinating. And I actually had another subject that I studied in which she was in rouleau, and I sat her on a grounding pad, and the rouleau dissipated, and I could see it dissipate with the ultrasound. So it could be that in some people, the discharge of these anomalous currents into the earth then brings the body back into a normal coherent state, and the rouleau dissipates. And so that's another variable, is the grounding, the way that we're grounded to the earth.
Yeah, I was at a EHS conference in, I think it was 2017 in London, and we met with, and I have a video about this, and I interviewed 7 or 8 people, but the majority of people were feeling amazing out in the middle of nature in a completely EMF free environment. Someone who worked on cell towers, no more psoriasis. Someone who did his entire business off of his phone, and he was only 19 years old, but was feeling like what he called a crickety old man, felt wonderful in this nature environment. So I think there's a lot to be said for being just bathed in real energy and not having it's fake energy. It's just man-made fake energy, right? That's just everywhere on our body. It feels to me always like it's just a bunch of darts hitting me all at once, And then
Yes.
when I go
Yeah.
under my canopy, I have a anti-radiation, beautiful organic canopy that I sleep under. It just feels like I am outside, like I am grounding. And I'm a firm believer in natural grounding. I'm not so sure about grounding through an electrical outlet these days with all the dirty electricity that can also somehow combine with that grounding mat. So I've found a lot of relief from just touching the ground, being outside in nature,
Right.
like you're saying. And so I did want to ask you, because you know all about radiation, the difference when people do say non-ionizing versus ionizing radiation. We're pretty clear that we shouldn't have a lot of x-rays, but which one is more dangerous to our body?
Well, I think that ionizing radiation is clearly more dangerous to our body. The big difference is that when you have an X-ray or a CAT scan, you're being exposed for a matter of seconds, and then it's over. And so you compare that to 24/7 exposure to non-ionizing radiation, all of a sudden the non-ionizing radiation becomes more of a health concern because of the chronicity of it. And that's really the issue. And a lot of the studies that have been done that have come up with negative results are done with short-term exposures. And you really need long-term chronic exposure to end up with some of these chronic diseases, because that's what they are. They're chronic diseases from chronic exposure. If you expose somebody for 10 minutes to a Wi-Fi, if you have EHS, you might feel something from it, but again, that feeling is variable depending on your current state, your state of hydration, there's so many variables that impact. And unfortunately, and this is one of the things that has kind of created a lot of confusion in the literature in terms of people with EHS, is they did these studies called provocation studies, where they had groups of people who had EHS, and they tried to expose them to either a sham or to a cell phone or something that was emitting the radiation, and the people couldn't tell if they were being exposed or not. And again, we're talking about short-term exposure. We're talking about something where it's subtle, and perhaps it takes a while for somebody to start. If somebody has no EMF in their environment for a period of time and then they're exposed, it could be that there's a delay in feeling the impact, as opposed to like turning on a light.
Isn't that
So
interesting? That is
yeah,
exactly it.
yeah,
And I would like to know more about that phenomenon, because you would think it's the opposite. You've had no exposure, you get the exposure, ouch. No, it's much worse being in a city these days. Like, say, I love New York, but we were in New York recently and it was just
same
so
here.
uncomfortable.
Same experience. Same
And
experience
then
here.
it felt like just back in the room. I always travel with a canopy as well, but back in the room, it felt like just even my husband's phone being on was like, turn that off. It made me more sensitive.
Right. And people who have had acute exposures to really high levels of EMF, then they often will, or maybe not often, but they have an increased chance of becoming EHS after that.
Correct.
It's kind of like, well, some people consider it like a if you have a bucket and you're filling it with water, then the bucket slowly empties as you're away from it for a period of time, but then when you get exposed, it starts to fill up again. If your bucket's full and then you have exposure, then it's going to overflow. You're going to have symptoms. So there's that analogy. But yeah, it's very it's a terrible thing because people are suffering, and there are voices out there that are dismissing it, and I find that particularly objectionable, because I just think it's unkind and it's wrong to dismiss people who are sick with this. It's awful that we don't have any safe spaces in our cities for people to be where they are like. Why do we have to be exposed to this? Even if you're in your own if you're in your own home and you do everything just the way you want it, you create the
Right.
windows, the
Hardwired,
windows,
shielded.
you do the
Yes.
wiring, you have everything's hardwired, you have Ethernet cables. Then all of a sudden they put a cell phone tower across the street from your house, and they blast this radiation through your walls. You have no control over it.
Absolutely. And I love in your book, you give great direction as to what to do. And in addition to the book, Unplug, everyone, Rob is also involved with the Environmental Health Trust. And Deborah Davis founded the trust. And I remember her always saying this: there is no safe level that has been determined of EMF exposure. What do you think about that? Is there one now?
No. Well, no, there's, well, what I would say is this. Your retina, light is EMF, right? Visible light is part of the electromagnetic spectrum, and your retina can detect one photon of energy. That's how sensitive, one photon and your brain will pick it up. So our bodies are definitely sensitive to this. And our biology is such that we have evolved with the sun as our major source of higher frequencies of EMF, visible light, infrared, and some ultraviolet radiation. And so we have chemicals in our skin, melanin and other, they're called chromophores, and they absorb the light and they reflect it back into the environment as infrared energy. And that process keeps our bodies cool, and it prevents the radiation from going deeper into our bodies. It protects our cells. If you think about it, that's how we're protected from natural forms of EMF, is from melanin. And so, people whose ancestors were from the southern latitudes where there's a lot of direct sunlight, they have darker skin, and people from the northern latitudes, they have less melanin because the sun was very rarely up in the high in the sky. And so that's how we have evolved. And somebody just asked me about, well, I'm sorry, let me get to finish this point. So that we have evolved to absorb and reflect a certain bandwidth of energy, and that's the energy that we are naturally exposed to from the sun. The energy that we're creating now is I'm sorry, I just got a
Is
ding
that
from
you?
Deborah. It's from Deborah, actually.
Wow. See, that empathy thing works where she's vibing us.
Hey, no, I thought I had this on focus, but for some
August just
reason
mentioned you, by the way. We knew you were going to weigh
that's
in.
funny.
Okay.
So anyway, yeah, the frequencies that we're being exposed to with our technology are not absorbed by these chromophores. They're very specific to a certain frequency range. And so all these frequencies from ELFs created by power lines and radio frequency radiation from our wireless technology, millimeter waves, and all this stuff goes through the skin. It goes through the skin and into the body. And depending on the frequency, it has a different depth of penetration. So that's the issue. So there's no safe level for somebody who has no defense to it. I mean, some people have depleted immune systems.
So many people are exposed to so many other toxins
Right.
that are contributing to just an overall lack of well-being and health for ourselves.
Exactly.
So this is just one more. So, okay, we're clear. There's no safe level of exposure. And then you touch for a moment on the millimeter wave. And now we know 6G is coming with the terahertz wave. Do you have any thoughts about that being worse or better?
Terahertz is a higher frequency, so it's going to penetrate less deep than, say, the gigahertz frequency band. But with that being said, it's going to deposit more energy. So it's going to deposit more energy into the skin. It could end up causing more skin problems. It could impact the eyes. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. And again, with the idea that these waves are going to be modulated, it could be that they're modulating the terahertz frequency with lower frequency bands, which are then going to penetrate deeper. So we don't really understand enough. At least that's my understanding to really get that it's safe. I don't think so.
So, and I just feel like it's one more layer on top of all the other layers because even 3G and 4G have not gone away. We,
Right.
we still have that
Right.
cell phone tower with those waves traveling 75 miles. And then we've got, the small cells everywhere. It's just a mess for someone who's sensitive and even for people who are not.
The most intense exposure that we're getting every day is from our phones. So I tell people, please don't put your cell phone up to your ear when you talk. Use speaker mode. Don't keep an active cell phone in your pocket, and certainly don't put it in your bra. So those are like that's the easiest, least um, uh, behavior altering modification that I could recommend is just, and turn it off if you don't need it. Like that would be But of course, most people can't do that. They could never turn off their phone. But I would
It's
say,
funny, isn't it? Yeah, true.
yeah, I know people sleep with it. It's like, oh my God, how could you do that? It's affecting the melatonin production. People all over are getting sick, and it's because of this kind of stuff. That's just melatonin is such an important compound for our immune system, and to have the cell phone is producing an energy that's similar to light, and the brain, when it detects light, stops producing melatonin because you're supposed to produce that when you're in darkness. And so if you're sleeping next to this source of radiation, you're not going to produce the melatonin you're supposed to.
It's just
And
like
then you
light. That's how we should
right.
envision it, right?
It's just like light. That's right.
And so, how do you feel about it? The quick fixes, the easier things that people are looking toward. As this topic trends, so do all of the ideas for, chips that you put on your phone or a harmonizer that you put in the middle of the room that's supposed to somehow change the waveform so that it doesn't hurt you anymore. What do you
Right.
think about those things?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't understand the science behind them. I'm familiar with a lot of these products, and I've read what they've had. I've read their testimonials. Well, there's a couple of points to make. One is I don't believe that there's any way to make the radiation safe in terms of changing the waveform. If you were going to totally make the radiation safe, you would absorb it and then you wouldn't be receiving the signal. So there was one company that sent me a product once. It was this it was like a pouch to put a cell phone in, and they were saying, oh, it's going to block the EMF from the cell phone, but you could still get a call through it and you could still talk through it. So obviously it wasn't blocking the radiation because the radiation was coming through the pouch and it was still connecting to the network. Um,
Right. You
Similarly,
had me for a second at pouch, because I do use a Faraday pouch that seals all the way. And then, of course, there's no signal.
right. Well, that's different. Yeah. If,
Right.
if this was not, it had a wire attached to it. And I don't know. It was somebody who's trying to design a product to sell. Yeah, there's a market here for people. People are looking for something to help them. There's the placebo effect and the nocebo effect, meaning that your mind can kind of create impact on your health. I certainly believe that. And so, if somebody believes that something's going to help them, then perhaps maybe it will. Uh, and the same point, if somebody believes something's going to hurt them, then it can do that too. Um, so there's that aspect of it,
And I
but
love
I
this.
don't,
Can we go a little deeper there?
yeah,
Because yes, I completely agree with you. So we don't want to have fear. We want to create awareness, but we also will reach a point where just believing something is going to work that doesn't work at all, it
right.
will absolutely turn against us. And, you know, it will prove itself to not work. So where's that line?
That's a good question. I mean, yeah, you don't want to put your head in the sand and say, "Oh, I've got this special amulet on me. I'm safe, and therefore I can put the cell phone up to my head." And lo and behold, you're going to end up with some sort of complication from the radiation. I think it's really important to be educated in this field and not to be uh, swindled by some type of amulet or crystal or something that you think is going to protect you. Yeah, it's not about fear mongering, and it's not about trying to get people to be afraid to use any technology. It's really more about just becoming educated and using it wisely, and turning it off when you're not using it, and creating a space when you don't have any exposure at all. That's what I try to talk about in my book. Like, just create a space so that you can rest every night and you can produce melatonin and you heal, and then you can start the next day and just try to limit exposure during the day. But as long as you have that period of time at night, you can stay healthy, I believe. Except if you have VHS, then of course you've got symptoms, so you have to deal with that.
I love the fact that I can feel it because I know when I'm safe. and I know how I feel. It's great. And you're right. I do feel so much better. And I feel like I rejuvenate and I'm able to go out into the world of EMF for a little while and then come back and and feel good. It's not
Right.
like I'm instantly inundated like it was in New York. That was different. That was just probably an incredibly high level of exposure. And it was more than a day, it just kept going and going. And by the way, when I fly, I also fly in a cocoon of this wonderful material that insulates me from the EMF. It doesn't drop it completely because it's become so strong, the
Yeah.
exposures. And
Yeah.
so, but it's down to a much more tolerable level. And that's another question. We said there's no safe level, but there's definitely, for me, a more tolerable level. So why is that? Why do I feel better when it's at moderate than when it's extreme, when the level is extreme?
It's probably because it's affecting less of your body. I don't know. I think that's unique to all of us. What one person senses as being tolerable might be intolerable to somebody else, and another person might be insensitive to all of it. So it's so variable. I don't. It's kind of like going out to see the fireworks or going out on the ocean, and you're on a boat and you're surrounded by waves, and one person might get seasick while another person might be enjoying it, and another person might feel a little bit. We just have different sensitivities to energy,
That's true.
all forms of
That's true.
energy.
Right. Oh, right. But that doesn't mean that even if we were out on the sea and we were being jumbled all that time, that probably something isn't happening inside biologically anyway. Right.
Right.
Just from
Yeah,
from
the
that and me.
jostling. Right.
Right. Right. That's what I'm envisioning anyway, that I'm jostling. And even if I don't feel anything, it's probably doing something inside. So anyway,
You
this is,
mentioned the canopy, the sleeping
yes.
canopy, and I used one of those too. When I was starting the book, I was living on 7 acres. I had no radiation in my home at all when I turned the Wi-Fi router off. It was wonderful. And then I moved into the city of Pittsburgh, and I ended up surrounded by Wi-Fi's of both neighbors and people down the street. And there was a 4G antenna down the road. And anyway, I had to buy a sleep canopy, like you were mentioning, and I felt the same way that you described. I felt like I was in a cocoon. It was wonderful. It was wonderful. It was wonderful until they installed a 5G small cell across the street from my house.
Millimeter wave.
Millimeter waves. Yeah,
Yeah. It doesn't work. It
it
doesn't
doesn't
work.
work.
No.
So people need to be
Too
aware of that.
tiny.
Right.
Yeah.
So those waves go right through that sleep canopy.
I realized that immediately. When I found one, I took my canopy over to it and put the meter on the other side, and I realized it's not blocking millimeter wave. However, then I went into the house that was right next to this. I mean, it was literally in their front yard, and we're talking a small street front yard, so maybe 50 feet to the house. I went into the house, and there was no millimeter wave detected at all. So the one good thing is that millimeter wave doesn't travel very far. And I don't really feel like it's getting into our homes as much as obviously as the other radiation. But I think that's a very unstable wave and it's not moving very far. And so we have a lot of protection just from construction. I think we are inviting the millimeter wave in with our new devices. I mean, new Wi-Fi's have millimeter wave. My husband's new phone has the millimeter wave in it. I have an iPhone 11 because I'm not introducing the millimeter wave into my life if I don't have to. But that was my experience. So I want to know, how far away were you from that tower that it was getting into your home?
It was across the street, and I was in the third bedroom, but all the rooms in the back of the house were not exposed. There was no detectable energy in the back of the house, but in the front of the house, it was uh, it was high. But what was also interesting is if you called up the network to download a video or something, there would be a blast of energy. It was brief, but the beam is focused and it intensifies and it just blasts out energy that then would go all the way to the back of the house.
I've heard about this. I'm so sad
Yeah,
about it. It's
yeah.
crazy. Now, did you have a millimeter wave connection? You must have in order to feel that blast. So was that in your phone or your computer or on your
We
TV?
had a we were doing a study in the house, and we downloaded something on a phone and had the detector there to see what the impact would be, and we surveyed it. Yeah.
Okay. And then also, was your canopy made of pure silver? Was it conductive? Because I've also had problems with those. They're so conductive.
It was conductive, and it was grounded. Yeah.
It was grounded, but even if it's grounded and conducted, it does take that outside energy, pushes it back at you, and magnifies it.
Interesting.
There are different canopy fabrications. Some do have to be grounded, some do not have to be grounded. And so I would go with a non-necessary grounded situation. And I would be so careful of having any wireless in my home at all in that situation.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, that's very interesting. Can you tell me, just the last question, I'm fascinated, how did you get involved in the Environmental Health Trust?
So I wrote this book, Unplug, and I sent it to Deborah Davis to see if she might endorse it for me, because I was looking for people to endorse it. And initially, I didn't hear back from her, and I sent her a follow-up email, and she said, please send me the book. And so I sent it to her, and then my next message back from her was, we need to talk.
Yeah, she
So
could recognize greatness. Really, this is
we had
it's
a long
true.
conversation, and she invited me to be a scientific advisor for Environmental Health Trust. I did that for a few months, and then she invited me to be a vice president for scientific research and clinical affairs. And so I've been doing that now for I think it's been about 3 years. And I adore Deborah. We've worked really well together.
Tell me, what are your goals with the trust? What you personally and particularly, what are you guys hoping to accomplish now?
We're trying to document real effects of the radiation. So we want to do more work with Rouleau. We're looking at the impact of radiation on people, on the retina, the blood flow in the retina. So those are my immediate goals. Yeah, and right now we're also doing some other work I can't really talk about, but it's been we're busy,
Good,
very
good.
busy. Yeah,
Right. I know
it's a
there's
great
the
organization.
lawsuit, and the lawsuit that was
There's
pretty
the
much
lawsuit,
ignored by the FCC, which
right?
is which is the problem, honestly. If we had a government body that even acknowledged their own research, the National Toxicology Program pointing to heart cancer and brain cancer, we'd be a lot better off. But instead,
Right.
that was just animals. How many studies, as a doctor, how many studies are done on animals when you're
Yeah,
researching
it's
a
a
toxic exposure?
well, certainly it's a common practice. It's been going on for 100 years, and yeah, they just don't want to. And I think we mentioned earlier in our discussion that, well, I think, yeah, you said you had a relative who told you that the cell phone could cause brain cancer a long time ago, like decades ago. Before we have all the research has been done. This is not a scientific question anymore. We know that there are non-thermal effects. It's just a matter of convincing industry and our government that it's significant enough that they need to change direction, create safer products. We have all these electric cars. Well, why can't they make an electric car that has an electromagnetically neutral interior? So if you're in the car, you're not being exposed to EMFs.
I
Why
have,
can't I mean, there's got to be a way to do that.
there is. It's just grounding the wires properly. But then there's also the wireless energy that just about every new car maker now does not allow us to turn off completely.
Right.
And then it's just magnified in that metal environment. But anyway, real quickly, what Rob was referring to was a conversation we had before we started, where I talked about how the first time I picked up a cell phone, I could feel the energy. And it was in a conversation with my father, who was a nuclear physicist, who
Right.
told me to put the phone down
Right.
because
Exactly.
it would give me brain cancer. So I've been, and
Yeah,
I left
I
it
don't know if
on.
you want to divulge that information. That's why I was a little bit more
I
squirrely
should
about
put
it.
that part of, I'm going to, it's fine. I'm going to put the rest of that video up so people can hear it, because, it turned out that now finally, to answer that question, have we seen, because I've heard people say it's not true, but have we seen an uptick in brain cancer in any age group that you personally are aware of since the advent of cell phones?
I personally have not seen, I have not in my practice seen an increased incidence of brain cancer. But what I will say is that it takes a long time for brain cancers to grow. And so the increased use that we've been seeing in the past 20 years might not surface for another 10 years.
Wow.
So it's really there's a delay in manifestation of disease. So I don't know, but I will also say that habits are changing in terms of the newer generation. They don't even talk on the phone. The younger generation, all they do is text. So it could be that we never see that we kind of hit a bubble, and now because cell phone habits have changed, that we're not going to see that impact anymore. But I am very concerned about the impact of the wireless communication on the thyroid gland, which is very superficial, and white blood cells. I think that the combination of thyroid dysfunction and the impact on the white blood cells, natural killer cells in particular, are potentially increasing our risk for other cancers, because
Interesting.
your pancreas, the colon, all kinds of GI cancers that are becoming really, really common. Your body is supposed to ferret these things out and kind of kill them before they take hold, and that's the job of the natural killer cell. But EMFs have been shown to negatively impact the behavior of natural killer cells. So it's impacting that, and also thyroid
That's huge
dysfunction.
information. That's
Yeah,
huge.
yeah, and then not and thyroid also. If you have thyroid dysfunction, that also impacts your natural killer cell activity. So these two pieces of the puzzle, they may be increasing the rate of cancers, in distant locations.
And not just cancer. I have the latest brain tumor registry shows that in the age group 15 to 39, there is a higher incidence of tumors than ever before.
Right, right. So there's different types of tumors like meningiomas and acoustic neuromas. There's different types of tumors in the brain, and yeah, it's really. I know when I first started doing research, people were wondering about the increased incidence of acoustic neuromas, which is a
Right,
benign tumor that can
right
affect
there.
the nerves going into the ear. I haven't, in my practice, I haven't seen that, and I don't know. Um, some of these things might be specific to certain frequencies. They could be, again, related to cell phone habits, uh, the skewed populations for study. It's difficult to nail down. It's
Well, you
really difficult
had
to
me
nail down.
at decreasing natural killer cells,
Yeah.
honestly.
Well,
Right?
that's a different impact. There's so many
Well,
impacts. There's so many impacts of non-ionizing radiation. It's just mind-boggling that they're still trying to kick the can down the road.
right. There are so many potential problems, really.
Yeah.
That's what these thousands of research studies tell us. So, thank you so much. Is there
Oh, this was a
anything else
pleasure.
that you'd like to tell us from the book that I'm missing?
Just my message to everybody is to go out and enjoy enjoy the natural world. This is, we live in a beautiful, and our world is a beautiful place. And if you get away from technology, just go out and be with nature, and just be present with the natural surroundings. And then you'll waken up. I just feel like people have gone to sleep with all this constant entertainment, and it's really damaging in so many ways.
It's just like the most wonderful thing you could have said. Thank you so much. I feel good just hearing it.
Yes, it is science. Yes, it's complicated. But I want to give you a couple of quick takeaways from this really wonderful conversation with Dr. Rob Brown. Thank you. First, Dr. Brown says, man-made EMFs are not harmless. Yes, he said that. And that's what you can share with everyone from a doctor. He said there's so many things we really don't understand, but the argument that it doesn't do anything is, in his words, hogwash. It's 2 words. I love them. And people who say it's harmless, well, they're just ignorant and they haven't kept up with the science. And secondly, from this conversation, it's clear to Dr. Brown that EMF causes oxidative stress. And that allows the free radicals in our bodies to do damage and even affect our DNA. And thirdly, he believes our best course of action is to do what I've been talking about for decades. Treat EMF like I do, like any other toxin in your world. That means I limit my exposure. I maintain distance from the source of EMF. That's wireless radiation, electric and magnetic fields. Now, you're probably going to have questions. I want you to continue to ask them. Read sources that you trust, like Tech Wellness, and decide what you want for your family. We have the latest research in our EMF guide, and we'd love to hear from you. We try to answer all that email that we get at hello@Tech Wellness, and also go online to our Instagram Tech Wellness, to our TikTok, and just ask the question and let us answer it publicly. I'm August Brice. This is Thriving with Technology. Until next time, be well.